Campbell, mate, the Outback travelling vet. How you going?
I'm very well, thank you, sir. Yourself?
Mate, I'm going well. Tell us, where are we? What are you doing here?
Mate, we're currently on the road/airstrip of Mount Leonard Station, leaning against beautiful Pip, the Piper Lance. Mount Leonard Station is literally within rock throwing distance of Betoota, the infamous Betoota, in the Channel Country, on the eastern aspects of the Diamantina. And the reason that I'm having a chat with you today is, the flying vet. Just finished a sortie, a deployment of sorts in Alice Springs and around Daly Waters, and heading on my way back to my home area of Queensland.
Unreal. So whereabouts, what's your involvement in ag? And how, well, I think we're going to get to the stages of how someone becomes a flying vet, because it seems like a pretty cool job. But have you always been in and around agriculture?
Yeah, no, I was really privileged to be born into cattle stations. My family had cattle properties near Charters Towers originally, so I was the eldest of 4 children. Grew up there. Did school of the air. Typical sort of upbringing of station kids in the more isolated areas of Australia. Finished boarding school. Went home to the properties for a gap year, and then pursued my career in veterinary science and studied a veterinary degree in Townsville.
What was it like growing up out on the station doing school of the air and
Mate, fantastic, and it's often a question I get asked, and I'm always a bit stumped because we didn't really know anything different. But reflecting back and talking to people of a different postcode, it is pretty special. We're in the day where your radio got mailed out at you at the beginning of the year, and you put it with the mailman. The mailman being someone that drove out or flew out once, twice a week, and then you'd send the radio back to school. So I remember, beginning of the school year, you'd unpack your old HF radio, string the antenna across the tennis court or the horse paddock, tune her in, and start doing your lessons. So Mum was really great. Had 4 kids under 10 in the classroom. Structuring it like a normal school, but you do your lessons and sort of manage being on a cattle property at the same time. So it was really great. If we had lots of mustering on, you could do 2 days worth of school for the week leading up, and then you take a week off and go out mustering with all the ringers and the bush camp, and it was fantastic. And I think as a young, as someone, when you're that age, you do grow up a little bit quicker in certain regards with responsibility. And you might only be 8, but you'd be looking after all the kids in the homestead, keeping an eye out when everyone was coming home, lighting the donkey hot water systems, making sure that they were stoked up for the ringers and the bush camp when they came back, running food and water out somewhere, being told to run the plant horses out to a certain area. It was fantastic.
What age do you reckon you started driving?
We had an old Daihatsu Rocky on the station, and I reckon we started driving that at about the age of 7. So about 6 or 7, I reckon. So keep going.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
No, you're right. I'll just grab my sunnies because it's bloody.
It is glary, isn't it?
Oh.
And plus you're hungover. That's a bit seedy. Started to learn. We had an old Daihatsu Rocky on the station. Little sort of light 4-wheel drive ute thing. You couldn't kill him. And I still remember my first lesson with my father. Doing hill starts in a manual on the way back from pulling a windmill apart. So probably would have been at 6 or 7. I remember dating a girl once and saying, when my kids got to a certain age, I remember getting my first old-timer pocket knife. I'd love to give them one, And she's like, what age would you be giving children a knife? And I was like, 7 or 8, and just mortified by it. But, once she came out and saw where I was from, she could sort of understand it a little bit more, firearm safety at a young age, involved in aviation at a young age. You were given a 2-way radio. And you'd be out mustering with all the stockmen, and it was expected of you to perform to the the level of an adult. I know they did a case study on a lot of the station kids going to boarding school. I was lucky. I went to Nudgee in Brisbane, and often the teachers used to think, these bush kids, they're bits of they're little lippy bastards.
Really?
Yeah. they'd tell teachers, "Oh, but I'm the adult here," and they'd be like, "I don't care." They'd give it back a little bit. There was always sometimes a bit of clash of culture, and they sent some teachers out onto these stations, and they were like, "Holy shit, this kid's like 13, 14, and driving a truck, and or in charge of watering the horses somewhere, or running a bush camp sort of thing," and going like, "Oh well, I've been talking to them condescendingly in a classroom."
Yeah.
When out here they're expected to you're a young adult and the responsibility is of one. So that was definitely something that transitioning from school of the air and going to boarding school was that was one of the things to go like you're just not out in stock camp anymore. You can't just tell.
Do you remember that, like that first time you had left home and had headed off to boarding school? Do you remember what it was like?
Yeah, no, I definitely remember what it was like, and you're like, wow, there's girls, and I didn't really know much about them, or like, people that weren't your siblings to like play football with, and stuff like that. Like, I really enjoyed it, the challenge and learning new stuff and being exposed to things. I was very fortunate that I started boarding school in Charters Towers, and then my last 2 years I went to Brisbane. Brisbane was two days drive from home. So we drive all day in the car, stay at Roma, and then the next day wake up in Roma and drive to Brisbane and get dropped off at school, and then mum and dad or just mum would drive 2 days home, and we'd see him at the end of semester. I remember being definitely a bit of fish out of water, and like kids talking about drinking and like pop culture, and you're like, I have no idea what these references are about, or what dressing fashionably meant, or anything like this. It was like, what, I can't wear rugby shorts and volleys everywhere. So, but there was always a group of like these station kids that were there going through the same sort of growth, and being off the dunghill as well. So we sort of could huddle together. I remember going to Brisbane, Nudgee was 1,700 kids. I knew no one, and rocking up there and shitting myself a little bit.
Yeah.
But I loved it in the end. Made plenty of friends, and it just expanded my horizons and set me up for my career in veterinary medicine, and an illustrious one it's been at that. That's for sure.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. I think jumping into the vet piece, but was it always the draw card for you? Was it life's ambitions?
I almost sound like a bit of a dick when I say not really. Like, it was one thing on the horizon. I was looking at apprenticeships in Mount Isa in the mines. They were quite lucrative and supportive. There was a lot of opportunity there. I was considering being a helicopter pilot or a pilot of some sort. There was always a subtle interest in aviation that I think blossomed as I got a bit older. And that was due, Dad flew, both my grandparents flew, grandfathers flew. So that definitely planted that seed. And then sort of veterinary science, I just didn't think I'd be good enough to get in. I was just some mongrel out in the bush that had learnt to spell and do some maths, and I did my application for James Cook University in Townsville, and it went really well. And before I knew it, I was offered a position, the inaugural year, the first ever one they'd done of undergraduate veterinary medicine at James Cook in Townsville, and I got in and somehow passed. So yeah, it was sort of something that really fell in my lap in that regard. It was a bush vet school that wanted kids from the bush and wanted to pursue that. More than just the plain old academia that a lot of the other veterinary universities were looking for, because we were seeing a veterinary shortage in the bush when I started that journey 17 years ago.
Yep.
And that's continued to get extrapolated now into more urban postcodes as well. So yeah, the veterinary industry is in a bit of strife, as we say. But yeah, it was one of the things that I always thought of. And I remember on the station, like, seldomly, like, we'd have a sick mare, or we'd take the dogs into town. You'd have to see the vet, and I just never really thought, wow, I'm going to be one of those one day. I'm academic or good enough to be there. And weirdly enough, I got in, and it sort of, it was. I was one of the first people in my family to get a tertiary education. So, in the North Queensland sector of our family, and I guess sort of paved the way and was venturing into an area of unknown. And since then, one of my sisters is a vet as well.
Okay.
My brother's a diesel fitter in Mount Isa, and one of my other sisters, she's a regional nurse in Alice Springs.
Huh, you guys are going everywhere.
Yeah, exactly. So, but everyone pursued. It was something that my family, both my parents had experienced the beef recessions, and seen good and bad times come, and they said, make sure you get educated or a trade behind you. If you do come back, or if something happens, you've always got something to fall back onto, and that, weirdly enough, has been very helpful in the progression forward.
Yeah. Tell me on the vet front, because we were chatting before, which was really interesting. Just the challenges of actually being a vet. You mentioned there just around the number of vets out in the bush. It's really struggling, but also then there's a whole mental health side of things as well. You mentioned the suicide rates.
Yeah, look, veterinary medicine is been in a bad way, and it's been like that for a long time. Like, as I said, when I started my journey 17 years ago, we said, oh, look, if you're here to make money, probably go to the medicine school, don't study vet, and be careful. The burnout rate and suicide is reasonably high. As I said, 5 years uni later, I graduated, and I was on 40 grand a year.
Yeah.
People often think that vets do well because our fees, our veterinary fees are high. Our veterinary fees are high, but that's a sequelae to, not compensate. It's not compensated or funded by federal or state governments, say like Medicare. You have to pay full fare. So, if we wanted to pay ourselves a reasonable wage, like a high wage, that would extrapolate to higher fees at the tills. So it's a delicate sort of thing that we've got to manage to try and get paid well. The mental health side of it, is massive. Like, normally, there's no 5 on 5 off. You're on call, and if you're on call through the evening and there's a cesarean that gets done at 2, you're back at you're back at work, at 7, 8 o'clock in the morning. So the burnout and the fatigue is massive. But the suicide is quite a sobering statistic. We're the highest in the world. We're double doctors.
In Australia.
And the UK and the United States. It's reflected all across, globally. But in Australia, we're 4 times more likely than the average Australian to take our life. We are double dentists and doctors. We are the highest, and I bury a friend every sort of 12 weeks on average. So, we've got multiple things happening where, 30. I think the statistics about 38% of vets leave within 3 years of graduating. 50% of vets have left by about 5 years out. So if it doesn't kill them, they leave pretty quickly to pursue another job. Got to get that house deposit. Got to get ahead financially. Veterinary science is a tough one to try and do that. And then obviously with people, taking their lives, it's making it worse. So that's why I fly, not only to permeate into the bush and get out onto cattle stations and do work there, but to get to clinics, not just in the bush anymore, in cities and large towns, to get vets in there, because it's not uncommon to go to a clinic. Like, I worked at a clinic, for example, in Dubbo a couple of months ago. It was a 6-week wait to get your dog vaccinated, and it was about 2 months to get them spayed. If you weren't a client already, it was closed accounts. Like, you couldn't just rock up to that clinic as a new client and get booked in there. They couldn't absorb it. Another thing that we've seen happen as well during COVID, $1.8 million pets have been acquired by people. They didn't go overseas.
Really?
They got pets. Yeah, it was substantial.
Bloody hell.
So there is some boom growth there, but there's less and less vets to sort of absorb that. So, I guess I'm sick of having that narrative of going, oh God, another vet's dead or another vet's gone, and I often struggle whether I'm going to stay in it forever. I guess that sort of is the segue to the next narrative as well. What do we do? I think, a few things I'd like to see is managing expectations with clients. Like, I was just in the Northern Territory for Territory Day a couple of days ago, and I'll see people walk in and spend $400, $500, $600 on fireworks, no questions asked, for 5 minutes of blowing shit up. Like a cheap show bag of fireworks in Alice Springs would knock you back about $125, and people would buy those things hand over fist. No questions asked. Come down, that was the fireworks shop, a mere 300 metres from our clinic. So $125 for a bag of fireworks that's expended in 5-10 minutes if you go flat rip. Or you come down the road to ours, it's about the same price, and you get your dog vaccinated against some deadly diseases for 12 months. People will hand over their money for the fireworks, no worries, won't even think about it. But the veterinary fee, people just, this is exorbitant. We're used to Medicare covering the bill in the human sector. So yeah, I think managing that, making sure people have done their due diligence, if they've got pets that, they are expensive. And having a credit card or I think pet insurance, really do your due diligence and look at that, because it's also, so you can afford when your dog gets sick, hit by a car or a dog bitten by a snake, that's $3 to $5 just there. That's just covering our costs of antivenin. That stuff is not cheap, and I can't give it away for goodwill. I've got a mortgage to pay, and I can't go, hey, Commonwealth Bank, old mate said my fees were too high. I did it for free. Is that all right with you? I'm going to default on my mortgage. So, yeah, just making sure people understand that and go a little bit easy on us. It's a shitty situation to find yourself when you're euthanizing someone's pet. They're quite upset, and the animal could have been saved, but financially it just wasn't feasible them being able to have a crack. So if your dog or cat or horse is insured, that means that we can do a lot for you, for a small cost. I have recently got a dog. He's from Fink, Indigenous community between Alice Springs and Oodnadatta in the middle of the southern part of the Simpson Desert. And he ran up to me one day, jumped in the plane, no one owned him, and came back with me with Queensland. He is insured. And people go, but you're the vet, your dog's insured.
Yeah.
I was like, absolutely. And
Exactly
in the last
what I was thinking working over there at Henry.
yeah. And in the last 8 months, he has cost me about $4,500 in orthopaedic procedures. He broke his toe. I went to go put a little plate in there. The plate's worth thousands of dollars just on its own. Huh. But my insurance mean that I've probably spent less than $800. So, yeah, I really recommend people, have a look and go there, because it's going to make our businesses more profitable. Hopefully, if we can pay people better and give them more time off, A, will stop us dying, and B, we can just have a bit more retention, because there's a lot of towns that have been used to having veterinary services that might not have it much longer. Mount Isa is just up the road. One of the vets up there just had a baby. There is now one clinic servicing that entire city, of 25,000 people. So,
yeah, wow.
We've seen that with the doctor shortage, and, people going, oh God, you can't get a doctor, or you get hurt out in the bush, the RFDS, or you drive a long way to get to a hospital. The veterinary sector's staring down that barrel at the moment. It's why I own a house in Townsville, but I use this bad girl to, cross the territory, back into the Kimberley, through SA, northern New South Wales and Queensland, up the peninsula, covering such a great area, because they just can't get anyone.
How do you look after yourself? Because I think it's an interesting conduit to, like, chatting about everything from the mental health perspective to, like, you're pulling some huge hours.
Yes. From
a work front. You're covering the whole of Australia. You're flying around the place. Like, how do you look after yourself when you're out and about?
Great question, and it's definitely something that I'm survived 12 years thus far, but yeah, I'm not immune to this problem, and it's something I keep an eye on. I had a tough week there the other day in the NT, had a case, and the guy couldn't afford it, and the dog had smashed some bones in an accident, and yeah, we had to put that animal to sleep, and yeah, seeing a grown man weep is something that, yeah, that got me, and I do need to take time off. I think that's where the aviation compartment of my job really speaks volumes. Like, I get in this and I don't really have to think about vet. I turn my phone on silent, I put my little my headset on, and I'm pilot Cozzy today. I'm not the vet. So they talk about human factors, and sure, aviation being a pilot exhausts you, but for me it's really refreshing, and I just try and schedule as much little snippets of time off that I can get, and really rest and recharge, because there is some heavy lifting to do, and with death and burnout and stuff, I've got to be careful. My family, we're from Charters Towers. We've got properties there. Dad was killed on a horse mustering just under 3 years ago, and that was massive amounts of mental anguish and sadness and mourning. So yeah, a shitty accident it was. I call it the gift of perspective, and it made me grow. And one of those big growth areas was like, Cozzy, make sure you're on it when it comes to trying to keep your finger on the pulse when you're running low.
Yeah. Tell me like about that. When your old man passed away, did you think of heading back home? Like, it was a freak accident, wasn't it?
Yeah. So mum and dad went mustering. So we've got a property on the Burdekin River just out of Charters Towers. Dad had his accident on the 9th of the 9th, 2019. So a bit of weirdness. So 2019, that was the year that all those cattle, Julia Creek, Cloncurry, we saw the footage where those massive floods just piled cattle in their thousands and drowned them. So there was a lot of rivers running higher than normal, not dirty, not flowing quickly, just high, just draining all that moisture. So yeah, the Burdekin wasn't flowing hard or dirty. It was just a bit higher than normal. A lot of silt, and Dad was born there on that property. That's where the old stock route is. It wasn't something that he wasn't used to. And it's something that, my brother and I and my siblings had done as kids, walked across it with jerry cans of diesel on our shoulders to go start a pump or swum a horse ourselves on our own, and think nothing of it. But they were just going to cut out some spayed cows and calves, and Dad got into strife on the horse, and he drowned, unfortunately. So, which Mum was there with him, which was traumatic because she had to watch it. But as I tried to remind her, I was like, we found him because you were there, so that made it a lot better. It was good for us with closure and stuff there. So yeah, I remember getting a phone call from my brother late that night. I was working at a veterinary clinic in New South Wales, and just said, "Oh, Dad's had an accident, yada yada. He's gone." And yeah, sort of that just like, we went. It wasn't like a palliative disease or chronic disease that you knew that was coming. It was sort of a pretty knee jerk, like, bang, you're dealing with this now. So I'm sure some of your listeners and yourself are no stranger to succession planning and stuff. We didn't really have much in place, and then all of a sudden, that's thrust on you. So it's definitely been it's been a rocky road, and it is a really difficult thing. But if there is someone listening now that they're either in if they're the keeper of the fortress of the empire, please sit down with your kids. Please, drop your expectations, listen to everyone, make sure everyone can go, hey, this is my vision. It might sound silly, just listen to me. Don't have expectations that this is the algorithm that the next generation has to follow. You've got to sit down and have a chat, because unfortunately, Dad will not be sitting in these narratives anymore with what he. I'm the 5th generation on that cattle station. Dad's not going to be sitting at that long table to have that narrative, which is sad. So yeah, if there is anyone at home that is in that difficult place, have the narrative. It will be uncomfortable, but do it while you can, because I speak from experience to go. It's a shitty thing anyway. 26% of farms go through succession planning, so 3 out of 4 fail and go nasty. It's not an easy thing. The odds are against us, but do it properly. I am lucky in my job that I go to stations where they've done it properly. And it's been a difficult task, but they're reaping the rewards on it, and the dynasty and it continues, the legacy continues.
Yeah, it's incredible. I think the amount of mates that I know that I speak to that have either wish they hadn't have gone home and had just gone off and managed a place or something like that, because like what it does to the relationship through it, like it's pretty sad.
100%. I speak from experience and rhetorically what I've spoken to other people as well, you stay at home, as you say, and it taints the relationship, or you go away and you're sort of gaslit, or you go away because you're like, I want to grow as a person, I've got a career, I want to see how different things are done and bring ideas back, and then it's like, oh, well, you left, and you're like, well, I feel like it's sort of, it's you're damned if you do, damned if you don't, but these decisions, I believe, they're emotional ones, and I think from what I can see, well, this is the way that I've done it, and this is the way it needs to continue, and I disagree. Agriculture is not immune to innovation and change, and we need to, as an industry, stay ahead of the game and be proactive and make sure our consumers like the products that we create. Like me going on to cattle stations, I go into some stations now that may not have had a vet there in 30 years. And it's good because we're out and about. We might be the first ones to see foot and mouth, for example, right on our footstep.
Yep.
So people go, oh, I'm spending money on bloody preg testing. This is bullshit. I'm like, you are also investing in surveillance for stuff. But, not just that, the social licensing to go like, well, we're a business producing beef or a primary product, and we're investing in our social licensing to go, there's a vet that turns up, man. We're not some just Yahoo operation. We're doing a good job. So, that is my concern sometimes. That we need the younger people to come in, and let's not forget about the old times and build off that experience. But my colloquialism is this: we've seen how many iPhones have come out in the last decade, how quickly they're changing all the time. So that's how quickly technology and the world changes. We've got to make sure that ag does something as well. Otherwise, we're just going to fall behind.
Yeah, absolutely. I've got a question on that, and it's actually today's podcast that I released with Ned Hannigan. His question, and we'll come to one for you, but like if you could change a perception of agriculture within the broader community, what perception would you change?
What perception would I change? I think... yeah, that is an interesting one because I think there's a few things, but there was always one I reckon, you'd go down the pub and meet some pretty little thing. They'd be like, "Oh, you're on a station. I love McLeod's daughters." Oh, that'll be, and you're like, "Hardy, mate, we're not going to be wearing cream moleskins. We're going to be, covered in flies and shooting cattle in the droughts during good times, and getting flogged by sandflies during the wet seasons, putting up creek crossings in the good times." I think what I'd like to see is, ag seen as a really progressive industry. I think that is one thing that, society and our consumers have on us is they're like, oh, these yahoos are just doing whatever, and, cattle are bad for the environment and overgrazing, and, they're just flogging it out for their own checkbook so they can buy a new Land Cruiser. Yeah. I think that's one thing that I'd like to see, and I think we need to continue doing that. And maybe I'm biased, but from a veterinary's perspective, getting your cattle preg tested. If you've got a cow that keeps coming in empty, why are you pouring food down her neck, and why is she out eroding your soil and eating your grass when she can, turn into a meat patty? Or she's the one that's strong during the dry times, flogging the little skinny cow out of the way for the lick and the good pasture. Having data, understanding, doing your food budgets, like rather than having to wait for BioBale to save your ass, going like, well, how many mouths do I need to feed and how much food do I have out there, and being able to mitigate to go, it will not rain, and what does that look like, rather than getting to a point where, it looks like this airstrip here, not a blade of grass, and the horse is bolted, and the people that are sitting there cross-armed going, oh, I didn't like agriculture already, and he proves me right. So I think that's what I'd like to see, and I am seeing it. I'm not saying that we're not seeing that in ag, but just continual innovation and just bringing in the new stuff and saying like, I'm not just old Cletus out the back with an over and under shotgun, shooting magpie geese and not brushing my teeth. It's like, no, we sit down, we make objective decisions, and this is a business. It's not just something, it's not McLeod's daughters. This is a functioning business with data and objective decision making, and involving nutritionists, vets, accountants, and you're at the coalface ringers as well, and making sure that all of those things are woven into the tapestry that makes agriculture so great.
Yeah, love it. I couldn't agree more. I think positioning, it is an incredibly progressive industry, but I think one thing that kind of driving through here, it just shows just how broad it is and diverse, and how quickly things change too, just between hundreds of kilometres.
Exactly, and there isn't going to be a one size fits all for that journey either. I can't tell someone that runs a fattening operation on the Darling Downs, I can't give someone, I can't give them a product or consultancy advice,
yep.
And then expect to roll that out here. It is very different, but I think there's some fundamentals that are the same, and as I said, from a vet's perspective, well, every time, why just get me out to preg test when you need a certificate to put animals on the boats? can we, I know mustering and doing rounds, it's hectic, man. Like you're managing stock camps and choppers and getting road train sorted and hay and, let alone if you've got a family, but, just making sure, let's make sure we got data and we know that why is 30% of my herd given a free feed year in, year out because they just never give us the calf. And I just blame it and go, oh, it's the neighbours pinching the clean skins, or bloody snake bites this year have been up. And it's like, actually, no, there's a problem here and we can, with investing in that stuff, you can make a difference.
What's next for you? Where are you going? Where are you headed once you take off out of Batuta?
Out of Batuta today, what's next in the short term? Going to Longreach for pleasure.
Yep.
Catching up with some veterinary colleagues there and just having a moment, talking about that recharging,
Yep.
Sometimes I like flying. Last time I flew into Longreach, I landed on some bloke's bloody driveway next to his mailbox and blood tested a heap of cattle and preg tested some heifers and then ripped out of there again. At least this time I'll get to actually, pull up and just sort of stare at the horizon for a little bit. Returning back home to Townsville, I bought a house there, but I've spent about 4 days in it. So I should probably remind myself what that looks like. I've got a stint in Mongolia in a couple of weeks. So I'm really lucky. I do the Mongol Derby, the world's longest horse race. So I rode. This will be my 10-year, a bit special 10-year reunion because, well, not with other riders, but my reunion with Mongolia. So 10 years ago, I rode the Derby as a rider, and then I returned every year as a vet. So 1,000 kilometres on Mongolian horses across Mongolia.
Incredible.
Going back to vet that in a couple of weeks.
you
And then
get back
after
from
that, I've got
Mongolia.
some Indigenous communities up in the NT to go in and, spay their dogs and do some disease surveillance after that. So that's my short term. Long term, I'm not sure. I do have a passion for veterinary advocacy to make sure that, we can start saving some lives. As I said, my experience, losing my father in such a freak accident, the sorrow that continues, what our family went through is just devastating. But we couldn't really prevent that. Like, that was just a freak accident that was going to happen. I'd really get upset when every 12 weeks there's a family like mine that goes through the exact same stuff just because we couldn't pay people better and give them more time off, and we just got bad awareness. So I think long term I'll do a lot of that. I really enjoy my aviation, so who knows. I have considered becoming a Royal Flying Doctor pilot, but I might have to put a bit of spit polish on my procedures. I can't talk like some bush fella over the radio when I'm doing that. So.
Cos, I've got one other question we ask everyone who comes on the podcast.
Yes.
You get the chance to go back to high school and chat with Year 10 students. What would be your advice to them around why they should consider a career in agriculture?
What would I say to a Year 10 student? Career in ag. Well, I'd probably be talking to someone like myself, and I'd probably be telling them to sit the hell down and stop being a little shit.
No, I said Year 10, not 30.
Yeah, true. Grow old, not up. I think there is, it is going to be a rewarding career. Circling back to innovation, we need, the average age of landowners in Australia is sitting at about 62, I believe at the moment. So we need these young people to come through, and we need your know-how and how to go, and bring in the new stuff. My biggest advice is, similar to myself, I'm not good enough for vet school or not good enough to study. No, turn up. 90% of success is turning up. Everyone else sits there and talks themselves out of it. It's all about being there and showing up. That's what gets success. So, you might be a Year 10 kid that's like, I've only grown up in the inner city suburbs of Brisbane. What would a cattle station want to do with me? Yeah, they'll probably rip the piss out of your accent for a bit. You'd be a bit of a green stick, but but they're probably going to be they're going to have a tougher induction than, say, myself, that was born into it with privilege, but they're still going to, because of that tougher pressure cooker, if they stick with it, they'll do far and they'll grow and they'll become a strong person, and I think you can succeed in that. And it's just so diverse. You might want to just be the ringer in the stock camp or a station manager. You might want to get into aviation. you know, you might want to get a nutrition, like, you know, there's jobs with the Land Council, there's, you know, even in northern Queensland where we used to just be cattlemen, you know, we're growing crops up there now. Like, there is so much change, and there's people growing, the population's growing, people need to eat. Yeah, come on over. There's always I think there's plenty of room at the table, that's for sure.
Absolutely, bloody oath. One final one. My guests get the chance to ask a future guest a question. So I feel like you'll just come off with something that will be bloody hilarious.
Maybe.
But what's a question that you'd like me to pose to a future guest at some stage?
Question to a future guest. Oh God, now you've got me. If you were speaking to yourself at your high school graduation, would you tell them to do anything differently? Or would you stick with what you've done?
I'm going to ask you that right now, your question. Would you?
As much as I get down about veterinary science, and it's, you know, it's almost brought about my demise a few times, like just being burnt out, I think I would have stuck with it. Yeah, definitely. Like, look at where we are, look at what we're doing now. You know, I've got to remind myself that that's all a sequelae to becoming a vet. I probably would have just said, hey, just expect a little bit of tougher resistance. You know, it will be a bit of a flogging, but that's okay. Yeah, don't be gaslit. Exactly.
Diamonds are made under pressure, Cozzy.
What's that, sorry?
Diamonds are made under pressure.
Exactly. Even rough ones count. So that's for sure. That's for sure.
Well, I like your hat, world's bravest pilot, Cozzy. It's been bloody
World's okayest.
Okayest. I thought it said bravest. Oh, God.
Mediocre, mediocrity. That's my middle name. So I know I've had a few passengers that have been reading the thing and they're like, world's okayest pilot. I was like, oh yeah, my flight school got it for me, you know. They're like, you're not our best, but you're far from our worst. And yeah, you may see a little bit of white knuckle going in as you start taxiing. So you've got, I think that's the thing you've got to do as well, is just, yeah, dig for the laughs, man. Like, life will try to screw you 6 ways till Sunday, but it's just, yeah, the little things like that that just keep you poking along 100%. Life's too short and fragile to be serious, that's for sure.
Well, Cozzy, it's been bloody fun, and nice to meet you out here in Batuta.
Yeah, lovely to have you. Great to take you for a fly and have a chat for 5 seconds. And I'm sorry to your listeners that won't get the last 30 minutes of their life back.
Cheers, Cozzy.
No, you're right, mate.